Hi, I'm Mary Wing Soares, and this is Transparency in Government. Today with me is Scott LaLiberty. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for inviting me.
I appreciate you coming every single month. It's I know it's a busy time, especially with the budget. We have a presentation tonight of the elementary school and the middle school and the high school and
It's a busy time of
the
year.
special education department.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Busy time of year in a lot of ways.
Right,
Mhm.
it is. That's right, because it's the holiday season too. And I know, teaching every single day, those kids are counting down those days.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have a couple of things to talk about. First of all, anytime anybody goes to the website, the first thing they see is substitutes needed, substitutes needed.
Very much so.
Yeah. And so one of the things that somebody had emailed me about was the fact that since she can remember, and she can remember back to like 1980, the substitute pay has been the same. It's
Right.
never raised. And I've heard a couple of different reasons for that. Anyone is allowed to substitute as long as they have a high school diploma and they are accepted by the school district, not the school board, but the district, right?
Right. Yeah. We have a background check, and yeah, but high school diploma would allow someone to sub.
Right. So it's different than if it was a certified teacher that would come.
Right.
And there aren't very many certified teachers who want to substitute. So.
Right. It's a tricky existence because really your work is very much day to day, and even to a point where you're waiting by the phone at 5 o'clock in the morning to see if someone calls in sick. And I know many years ago, early on in my administrative career, I used to call substitute teachers, and I was also appreciative of the ones that we had because we had a small group, but they were very committed,
Right.
and you knew that if your phone was going to ring at 5 in the morning to tell you whether or not you're going to work, you're a special kind of person. So we do appreciate the work of the people that do come in and sub for us, but you're absolutely right. It's tough to find.
Right.
Yep.
So, and you don't see a correlation between the amount that we pay them and the number of people that come forward?
We actually took a close look at that in a couple of occasions, this year being one of them. And what we were trying to do, obviously, as you know, in the larger picture with the budget, what we're trying to do is be as fiscally responsible as we possibly can, but yet still maintain the quality of school district that we want. There's my big picture caveat. With that being said, we try to be very careful about what we do with that sort of thing. Obviously, if we had a lot of extra money, we would love to be able to put it into that and draw in more people. But what we did was we actually surveyed other districts in the area. There are districts that pay $20, $30, $40 more a day than we do, and they actually have the same problem that we do. I think in the next few years you are going to see us try to start to bump salaries up a little bit to make it more attractive. But right now that wasn't the variable that made the difference when we talked to other districts.
Right.
Which is, that's the level at which we have to work at it. Like I said, the people who do it work very hard and they earn a lot more than they get. But it's going to be a little bit before we can answer that.
Yeah, they definitely do earn more than they get.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
It's not an easy job being a substitute, but it is a rewarding position, and it would be nice if more people would step up. But the other thing too, you had said the other day when we were talking about this, was the fact that the unemployment rate is so low.
Very true.
So there's so many other options out there that would pay more and would be steady. You'd know what you were going to do every single day, so that can be a discouraging factor for us getting people to come in.
It is, yeah. I think the last number I saw was under 3%, which is about what would be considered full employment. So yeah, there are a lot of if you have choices right now for that sort of thing. Yeah. On the upside, we always kind of hope to appeal that day-to-day scheduling option also offers some people a nice flexibility.
Sure.
To be able to say, well, I may want to work on these days, but not those days. I know in my previous stages of career, I was a little further up north and we were a little closer to ski areas. And some of our subs were folks who worked jobs, in the summer seasons,
Right.
and they would sub for us in the winter because
That
if there
allowed
was
them to ski.
if there was a snowstorm coming in, it was don't call me for the next couple of days. So there's some upsides.
Right.
We're hoping we can appeal to some folks.
And I know that in January we don't have as much difficulty because a lot of college kids are back,
True.
and this
Yeah.
is a great way for kiddos that are in education to
Right.
get some experience
Right.
working a full day in either elementary, middle, or high school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always, January is always a nice time of the year for us.
I think a lot of people that we know in the profession got their start in just that way.
Right.
I did.
I did.
I know I did.
Yeah.
And it is a great way for young people to earn a little bit of extra money while they're home, and also get a little experience.
Right. So you presented the budget since the last
did.
time that we talked.
We did.
And the budget was the delta between the default budget and the school board budget,
Right.
or the one, right now it's a superintendent's budget, it's not a
Correct.
school board budget.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
until they adopt it, it's still your budget.
Right.
So the delta is almost $1 million, right, or $1 million?
It's about 780,000 right
Okay.
now. Right. And a
Mhm.
lot of that is due to the new law, as you've heard a lot about. There are things that we used to be able to include in the default budget that we no longer can include.
Right, but those things are not, minor things. Those
They're
are pretty
not.
important things.
Right. They're not. A lot of them are differentials in contracts. We increase, and the example we've used a lot is transportation.
Right.
We have to provide transportation to our students. We do have that cost of that does go up each year. So we are not allowed to put next year's amount in the budget. We have to put this year's amount.
Right,
Just
as the
because of
default.
as the default,
As
just
the
because of the
default
way
number.
the law is written. If the default budget were to pass, we have to make up that differential by giving up something else.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I'm sure, knowing the school board as I do, that they're going to ask you that question.
Oh, yeah.
What would you have to give up in order for you to be able to pay for the things that are not in the default budget?
Right.
What is
Right.
that going to mean for the students and extracurricular or whatever it is that they're going to end up having to give up? Technology, infrastructure, whatever it might be.
Right.
So is your plan, though, to have both those numbers on the budget, or do you think with what the town did,
Right.
the town is having the default and the budget the same, and then they're putting a warrant article for the other amount?
Right. Right.
And so why as a superintendent didn't
Right.
you make that decision to do something like that?
The reason we don't generally, I'm trying to think of a way to make a short story out of a novel. What we build as a budget is what it will cost us to maintain and hopefully build upon the quality of the district that we
Right.
have. What we did was we followed the same procedure that we normally followed, because we feel like people in town are familiar with it. People know it pretty well. I don't know a lot. I know we do talk regularly, obviously, with our counterparts at the town. I don't know a lot about what went into that decision and why they went about it that way. What I can say is the proposed budget, the superintendent's proposed budget, is our calculation of what we believe we need to be able to operate the district as such. You're absolutely right. Part of the process for us is preparing for a default budget.
Right.
Been a number of years since we've had one. This is a very supportive community, and we're very grateful for that.
Right.
But that said, we always plan for contingencies, and that is a part of our process, and it's actually part of the law this year. We need to, as we present the budget, we need to present
Right.
the default budget in concert.
So looking at the budget the budget that we're in right now is the
Yes.
2018-19 budget.
Yeah,
and
it's
you're looking at
FY19.
It's FY19, and you're
Yes.
looking at the 19-20 budget.
Correct.
Okay. So looking back at the 18 budget, the 17-18 budget, okay, fiscal year 18 budget, how much money did the school return to the town?
I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly what it was. I know it was very minimal. If I remember correctly, it was something in the order of $10,000 to $15,000.
Oh, okay, so I mean,
was very
that's how
low.
close the budget was.
Yeah, yeah,
What you used
The
as
old- the-
opposed to what
right,
we
That
raised
was-
and appropriated.
right. That was the previous, the 18 budget. Right.
So I mean, that's how close it was.
It can be that close. Oh, yeah.
In years past, it's been a couple of $100,000, but
There are
that
times,
year,
yeah. There are times where it is, and we're more comfortable with that. I mean, when you're trying to manage a $75 million corporation, in essence, we have 800 employees.
Sure.
It's a pretty complex equation as far as how you come in with that, particularly when you're budgeting a year and a half ahead of time. And a lot of things, and I remember that year in particular, the FY18 budget in particular, was an interesting one because some of the things that came about that caused us to have to dip into some of the reserves and go a little bit deeper than we normally would were things like a disproportionate number of snowstorms on Sundays, which people go, why does that matter?
Right.
We have to bring our crews in on Sunday when they're earning overtime
half,
pay, and so that's a storm and a half for us. It's not
Right.
just a storm.
Right.
So things like that come about. And I remember another thing that we had to do is we had to bring in cranes to remove snow from the roof. It was very snowy, I don't know if you remember. And for example, South Elementary School has the sawtooth roof, which is passive solar, kind of an architectural design. But when the wind's blowing in the wrong direction and it's snowing, the snow builds up between those ridges on the roof, and it got so heavy that we basically were told, you got to get it off of there.
Right.
So that's a price tag to bring in. I know we had to take some off the high school. We had to take some off Matthew Thornton.
You had to take them off the middle school too,
There was
yeah.
there were spots, drifts, right?
Right.
To get a crane in, to get a crew up on the roof. Our staff can't do that.
Right.
You're looking at a $100,000 bill
Right.
that you don't necessarily budget for. So
Right.
that's part of the variable.
That little
yeah.
tiny cushion. I mean, because
Yeah.
considering $75 million, $200,000 is not a huge amount. I mean, some members of the board are always willing to say that's 0.5% or a 1/4%. You can find that in your budget somewhere to cut it.
Right.
But in case you need it, it's important to have it there, and it always does
Right.
come back to the taxpayer in one way or another.
Right. We return anything.
Right.
Anything that's left
Anything
goes
that's
back
left.
to offset taxes. Yeah.
So the important things this year that you are, we know that the staff is the 90% of the budget. I mean, it's
82.
82% of the budget.
82% of the budget.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
You know what they say about people who quote percentages, they're always exaggerating. But it's in fact, 82%. Not 90.
Yeah, I have to know.
Right,
Yeah,
right. So the other 18% is how
Right.
you're supposed to run all of the buildings, the electricity,
Right.
everything else. And your staff does a fabulous job
They sure do.
keeping the places clean and, maintained so that we can have,
Right.
the lives that we do in the schools that we do have. And that there isn't a whole lot of repairs that have to happen because your staff is so good.
The maintenance and the upkeep is phenomenal.
Right.
Our crews is as good as any. I put them against anybody in the state. They do a fantastic job. Of course, Chuck Zappola is
Right.
encyclopedic in his knowledge of building and grounds.
Right.
That does ultimately realize a cost savings because you tend to have fewer of those. We also have the Building and Grounds Trust, which is used on an ongoing basis for major projects, so that when you take care of roof upgrades on an ongoing basis, you don't have a big roof issue.
Right.
So that's just one example. It's used a lot because it's expensive.
But that's new to us. I mean, that's only like 3 or 4 years old that we've been
Yeah.
able to have trust accounts.
I'm
Savings accounts as they're as they're thought of.
Right. Right.
So that we won't have to have a spike in the tax rate because of that.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Now, the budget as it was presented actually represents a negative impact on the tax rate.
Right. Yeah, there are a number of, it's my understanding, a number of projects coming on the tax base this year that have increased the valuation, which results in a decrease in the rate. As far as that goes, we're being very careful to say to people, there is an increase in the budget.
Right.
It's less of an increase as a result of the additional properties that are
Right.
coming on and now paying taxes.
Right, and for
Right.
years, both the town council and the school board has been talking about,
Mm-hmm.
that triangle of property up near the airport that would
Right.
build all of these things that would expand our tax base and help us with our taxes, and
Right.
now finally that is happening.
It is.
And so we want to, let people know that that's positive. But
Sure.
the budget doesn't include everything that's going to be on the ballot,
Right.
okay?
Right. Also
Because you
very
have some
important.
contracts this year?
We are currently in negotiations with the Teachers Association. That would be added on. That would be a warrant article, the contract. We are also in negotiations with our allied health professionals, which for people who might not be aware of that, we have a separate group, which is our nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and people who are of a health occupation who actually work for the school district. That's a separate bargaining group, and we're talking with them right now as well. So we're hoping to wrap that up shortly and be able to get that out. But that's why it's not on there, because we're not at a point yet where
Right.
we've reached an agreement.
And those have to be decided or published by January 9th.
Yeah, I think
9th or 8th?
I had 8th in my head, but
Okay, well, you knew
8th or
82%, so it's probably the 8th. I had the 9th for some reason in my
yeah,
head.
we-
Okay, so
yep.
the 8th.
yep, we got a
Okay.
month.
All right, so those are 2 contracts that are going to be on there.
Right,
And then what
right.
other warrant articles do you expect will be there?
We have the maintenance trust account and the capital equipment trust accounts. We have those sorts of things which are on every year. Most of those are funded by fund balance at the end of the year. Those will be on. Probably the big one I know that we haven't gotten to the point where we've discussed this yet in a budget workshop with the board, but I know the one that we've been looking at a lot, putting a lot of work into and talking about is the IT, information technology bond that we would, I'm sorry, not bond, the warrant article that'll be, we're talking about bringing it forward. Of course, we need to make sure the board moves that forward as well.
Sure.
The idea is for us to create a trust fund for information technology, just as we have one for building and grounds and whatnot. One of the things that we're finding, a couple of years ago, we had a warrant article that was approved by the town to upgrade our wireless infrastructure in the district. It's been 2 years now. It gave us a nice increase in our network access for students and for teachers, and it was a nice step forward. But I think we have to avoid the thought that we're done.
Right.
And we're not necessarily asking for the latest and greatest. What we are asking for is a way for us to make sure that we maintain what's there, and where necessary, upgrade elements of it
Right.
as our instructional technology demands it. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. I know that there has been some of the classes have been using remote instruction. And so you might be on a science class, might be watching a video of a feed from a teaching hospital, as an illustration. I know there was something very similar to that was happening the other day. And as they were watching this doctor speak, the video kept stopping and buffering because it was being broadcast from the hospital in an HD video stream, and we didn't have the capacity on our end in a wire.
Right.
We didn't have big enough pipes to get the signal through.
Well, we don't want to say big
So-
enough pipes, because that's the illustration that
Right.
was given when we did
Right. Yeah,
pass
good
the
point.
last thing.
Yeah, good
What
point.
we want to say is that because we do have the bandwidth, we
Yes.
don't have the hard wire. We don't have the
wire
infrastructure right
itself.
now.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And some of our buildings are so old
Yeah.
that they have, outdated coaxial cable type things.
Right.
And I'm not the technical person either, but I do
Right.
know that our pipe is big enough. It's just the wires in the pipe are not
Yeah.
what they need to
Yeah.
be.
The piping coming in the house is plenty big.
Right.
The piping inside the house
Right.
that goes
Is what we need
around
to
through
work
the
on-
walls.
Is
That's
what we
it.
need to work on.
I'm an old English teacher, so when our IT group starts talking and things come out, I'm usually the buffer. I'm usually the one who goes, well,
Wait a minute.
hang on.
Right.
What did that mean?
Exactly.
So yeah,
Yeah.
But that is, when you see that, that'll be a warrant article. We think it's appropriate for us to bring forward as a warrant article because, you know, obviously it would be a trust account. It would be an annual thing that we could contribute to. We're proposing initially to raise and appropriate $500,000 to put in there. That's a lot of money. We understand that. I know that still needs to be discussed by the board. So, you know, we'll see where that goes and what people's comfort level is with that. But I think it goes to the larger mindset that we have of let's save as we go and maintain things just as we do with the buildings and just as we do with our equipment. Let's do the same thing with information technology.
So all of the other trust accounts, they wouldn't start with $500,000 though. You started with like 100,000 or something like that and built up.
Right.
So why that, you know, large a number?
Right. What we did was we had some of our vendors that we work with come in and work with our IT people to put together a number that would allow us to solve a lot of those problems right away. And that was the number that we came back with.
Okay.
One of the things, and you'll hear us talk about this when we discuss it in the workshop, it is infinitely possible that the board might come back to us and say, that's just too big of a bite. Can we do it in 2 years?
Sure.
Can we do it? That's one of those decisions where we come forward and say, this is what's required. Overall, we are completely willing to work with whatever we feel, you know, is prudent and responsible.
Okay.
So.
I know that the high school is going to be taking the SATs for the first time online.
Yes.
And that's hardwired.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's for security purposes.
Right. Yep. And because of the nature of the wiring, we were told nobody can turn on any devices while they're doing their SATs, which is a morning time.
You could see, it's like caution. That was sort of a cautionary,
Right.
Yep.
Your expectation is, should something like this trust pass, that would never happen again. That everyone in the schools all across the district would be able to access what they needed to access when they needed to access it.
That was the qualifier that we moved forward with. Was what we have similar issues. Elementary school, a lot of times the students, you'll have in iReady, which is an assessment and instructional tool that we use. If a number of students might be on it at the same time, and then someone else turns on a video or something, sometimes the speed is impacted. Something like that might not be as crucial, but it's an illustration of the same thing.
Right.
When you think about the network or the plumbing, to use our illustration, really the most narrow point is the limiting factor.
Right.
That's part of why, as a cautionary measure, we're asking people to let the SAT administration
and I believe
go.
that's very important.
Yeah,
absolutely.
we don't want to.
There's
have
not a
anything go
reason
wrong.
why anybody can't deal with not having technology for a half a day.
It's actually a good thing once in a while. Yeah,
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a nice challenge for everybody. But the point is that if in our future we do want our learners to have access to technology anytime that they need to have access to technology, we want the wires to be the right type of wires.
Right.
Because again, our pipes are big enough. It's just the wiring within the pipes are not the right type of wiring to carry that information out.
They were. It was more than adequate if you go back 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Right.
And a lot of people don't think. You know, I get a lot of questions. Well, why do you guys always need the newest and best thing? And we don't. That's not what we're saying. It's part of what we've talked about this. I know on the show before. The qualifier that we're trying to use now everywhere within the district is you start with the instructional piece and work backwards.
Absolutely.
You don't come in and go, okay, I'd really like a new computer, and then here's how I'm going to use it.
Right.
You say, here's an instructional tool that I'd like to use, or a challenge I'm trying to overcome.
Right.
What tool do I need to do it? It sounds like a subtle distinction, but what we're really trying to do is that's a way for us to be more responsible. To your point, for a long time, that the wiring that we had was more than sufficient. But now we're getting, as you know,
Well, there's so many
about
other
every
people.
4
Yeah,
months.
there's so many people who want to be able to utilize
Yep.
the technology because of what it allows them, the learners to do.
Right.
You know,
Right.
how it allows them to show their knowledge and the difference in the creativity.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think that's what we want, is to have our children to be as creative as they possibly can.
Sure.
That's, you know, and to take as much initiative if they can. And when they have these tools, they shine. I mean, they shine.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
And I know we talked a lot about the budget, and it's going to be the topic of conversation for the next couple of months till we get to the deliberative session in February, and then the second part of our town meeting in March when we vote.
Right.
So, you know, I hope that people will pay attention, because there will be further discussions about that delta between the superintendent's budget and the default budget.
Right.
And, you know, we have, as a town, have been so used to having a school board budget under the default budget that we really need to get that word out, why there's a difference now.
Right. It'll be discussed every chance we get.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yep.
But I mean, coffees, we gotta do a lot of different things this year, because I think it's important. And you know, I wish the state would sit up and take notice as to what they've caused, you know, what kind of problems they've caused as a result. But anyway, thank you again.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Enjoy
This has been
it.
Superintendent Scott LaLiberty with me today on transparency in government. Thank you for joining us.